connection.
Are we on the right?
Apologies, everybody. I think we're back. I'm hopeful. Anyway, we're back. For sure, you had wine in front of you at least, so you could have maybe had a little nip or something to kind of hold you over as we jump back into this. Hopefully, everybody's still with us, and maybe even more have gathered as we were just momentarily away. Once again, apologies. So we're going to jump in tonight, and I know a number of you who received the wines this week picked up a sheet like this, and so if you have that sheet and you want to follow along with that, we can refer to that a touch. If you don't have it, it's not a big deal. This is just something that we use here, Julie, Katie, Tony, and myself, to kind of taste through wines and give ourselves a little structure. So we will refer a little bit to that this evening. Hey, Sean. Hi, Jan. Allison, how are you? Jill, ooh, great to have you with us. That's awesome. Thanks for coming in. This is wonderful. All right. So those of you that have the wines, let's go ahead and pour a taste or two. And as with every tasting, right, we're going to use all of our senses to get started. The first sense, the most obvious one, is sight. And what do we see? We get to rule out some of the wine world this evening by way of at least rosé and red wine, although I've made the caveat before that it could potentially be the juice of a red grape that's pressed, like you would find, for example, in Champagne, where you've got two red grapes principally used, Pinot Meunier and Pinot Noir, to make a white beverage because the juice is pressed and not allowed to come in contact with the skins. In this case, we've got a white wine, so we're pretty sure it's going to be from a white grape, unless they're terribly difficult and they were trying to make it hard on us. But white wine, visual. Do we see, if you look at your sheet before you, is it clear or hazy? And that gives you an indication of some levels of quality, and potentially if there's something wrong. I had a tiny little bug in mine. That's no big deal. Just remove it. It's a tiny source of protein. If you want to drink it too, you can. Hazy might indicate some kind of sugar quality to the wine, might be unfiltered, something along those lines. It might tell you something along the way. Little facts that you start to gather as you're tasting through. So it's clear. And then the intensity question becomes part of it. Is it pale? Is it medium? Is it deep? And you can usually use a little bit of a white piece of paper like I have here, or a white background. If you don't have that, and you're just drinking at the dinner table, whatever works. Is it something that's kind of light in orientation? Is it something that is medium, rich, and deep? Or does it get pretty rich and is a touch more nuanced in its appearance and gives you a richer profile? I think this comes about more in the pale category, right? Courtney, you got the kids in bed already? You have to tell us how you do that. I have no idea, but welcome. Exciting to have you with us. Kristen, welcome. Jan, yeah, it's clear. And it's more on the pale side of things. And then color-wise, are we talking about something that's more lemon, gold, or amber? Pale and yellow. Yeah, like a lemony yellow, absolutely. It's not quite gold, and there's maybe a little flints of gold. There's more that white goldish kind of profile to it. And what does color tell you? Color can give you a general sense, right, of some potential varietals, right? Some aging of wine in particular, if you have a variation in color, if you've got more of a copper profile of color, something that's a little bit browned in color. In the white wine world, you might have something that's aged. So you can get a little bit more indication from that. I would say color can tell you a bit more about red wines, generally speaking, than a white wine will, just by the color alone. Although that said, for example, if we're talking about an aged barrel fermented Chardonnay versus a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, you might have very watery, almost a green fleck color in the Sauvignon Blanc, and you could have a near amber, but certainly a golden profile from the Chardonnay, so that could start to give you some indication. This is on the lighter side of things. We're in a pale color, a pale intensity rather, with a sort of a lemony yellow color, and that helps to give us some sense that we're probably not talking about a barrel fermented Chardonnay, but we could be wrong. all you're doing at this point is gathering information, like a detective would do. They would be gathering as many facts as possible, and then we'll put all those facts out and try to attribute those facts with the closest varietal and place and vintage that we can toward the conclusion. And again, the process of doing this can be parlor trick in orientation, can be fun, like, hey, I got the guess right. But more important than that is just enjoying the detail and the nuance that's available in these wines. And so they're picking wines, Julie and Tony are, that are pretty varietally correct. And by that I mean they're representative of the varietal of the place. They're not necessarily trying to trick us with things like a white Merlot. So Julie just said maybe. Nothing's off the table perhaps. But I think the idea here is to give us an educational experience where what we learn and ascertain about, say, last week's Douro Red, or what we learned about 2 weeks ago's Chardonnay from Oregon, gives us a general understanding of what Chardonnay might taste like there and what we might learn from Chardonnay, what the characteristics were of the Douro Red. And as we continue to do this, which is exciting that we'll get to do that, we'll also have kind of a collective reference point. And that's really what you build up in tasting over time. And so that your palate memory is developed and you start to know, hey, I smell this, and when I smell this, I think of X. And when I smell Y, I go to Z. And so that's all an important part of tasting. And so if you feel at all in any way discouraged by the process of this and say, I'm never going to get it, it's just repetition and practice. And the whole point of it, though, whether you get it or not, is just to enjoy what you have in your glass. Sean's jumping ahead into lychee, and Max is saying floral. So I guess it's time to talk a little bit about the aroma. Thank you for the prompts, gentlemen. We'll venture that way. So on the nose, first and foremost, beyond the lychee and the floral, is it clean? Is this something that has any faulted notes? Nose is ovally floral. Jan is saying, like grandma's perfume. Very good. Okay. Like what did she, like a rose watery element too? The foxes think they know. Should we just wrap this up? You want to go right to the final conclusion? No phone a friend, no discussion whatsoever. You just know it. The $1 million question is Todd's throwing out petrol. All right, let's talk about aroma then. So let's talk about fruit, earth, and wood. Since we're just nailing these right off the bat, you're well versed. Fruit, what do we get? On the earthen side, we've already talked about petrol. I've seen floral. I've seen, but any fruit characteristics? We got lychee earlier. Pear and green apple from Allison. All right, cool. Wet flowers. Yep. When you're thinking about fruit, think about tropical fruit, and then think about stone fruit, and think about berries, and then think about orchard fruit, apples and pears, like we've already noted here, right? Citrus, Crystal's got some citrus for sure. And lychee was jumping out for Steven right off the bat. Max is getting some pear, I think, yes. Peachy. Is that a descriptor for how you're doing or for what you smell in the wine? Christine's throwing in some cherry. Okay. Hi, Christine. Yeah, the lychee. Have you ever had lychee? For those of you that haven't, it's a funny little that has this kind of almost gelatinous flesh, and it has a pretty distinctive profile. And pineapple's coming in, blackberry a little bit, green apple and pineapple, some lime, absolutely. It's very expressive, right? So on the nose, would you classify this as light, medium, or pronounced? That's a no-brainer. It's pronounced. It's a really pronounced nose. All these things are just jumping out one after another, one beautiful expression of fruit after another. The earthen element of petrol, when we say petrol, Krista just threw in diesel. That's diesel. So a petrol-based product. And sometimes you get kind of rubber tires, sometimes you get diesel, sometimes you get Vaseline, some kind of element of petrol. And you put your nose in there, and you get past some of that pear, the pineapple, and the lychee, and there it is. It's just lingering quality petrol. Well, Field Lane is playing too. I think that's Star playing with green apple. Precise delineation profile from Fox's, yeah. Jeff, it's really pronounced. We've got tons of citrus. We've got some tropical fruit. We have a little bit of fruit in the way of pear. We have a beautiful expression of all that. We get the secondary float profile in the earthen category of petrol. How about any wood? Anybody smell any wood? Hey, Rick, welcome. And thank you for coining the beautiful term unctuosity. I'm not smelling any particular wood profile. So wood, again, you might get in the way of some spice. You might get in the way of something vanilla, something woody like cedar, sandalwood coming through. Okay, there could be a little bit of then more of a neutral element from sandalwood. Courtney, you got great addition for the flavor profile or the aroma profile of Jolly Rancher. There is a kind of confectionery sugar quality fruit that's on this for sure. Maybe a little bit of that sandalwood toward the back end, but mostly not really an expressive wood profile on the nose. All right, let's take a taste and see what we can learn about the flavor profiles that we get on the palate, as well as the taste profiles and whether or not they match up with what we just smelled. Normally I would spit, but that's just delicious. So I think I might just drink that. First and foremost, let's talk about taste versus flavor. Take it as a palate experience and do this as a quick exercise. This is a great wine to do that with. Take a sip. Plug your nose. And all you're getting there, besides a really horrible voice on my part, is the taste experience. Is it sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami? Those are the flavors you're going to see potentially. You're going to see sweet and sour principally. Sometimes you get sort of a mineral element that sometimes tricks you into thinking salty, but principally sweet and sour are going to be what you're going to find from the taste perspective. Olfactory is coming up, and therefore you don't get any flavor. You get the tastes. And so when we talk about whether wine is dry or sweet, that's one way to help you determine that. This wine is a little bit sweet, right? It has some sweetness. You can see that sweetness and the sweet you're going to get back in on the final part of the taste. And so let's just focus on that for a second. We have acidity. So looking at your sheet, if you were following along here, you're down toward the palate section. The first series of questions there are asking you about sweetness, which would be dry, off dry, or medium, or sweet. So off dry just says it's just a hair off dry, right? It has a certain level of sweetness, not terribly sweet. Medium would be a pretty sweet wine. And then fully sweet would be in the sort of dessert wine category of lots and lots of grams of residual sugar per liter. Jen, you're saying this is not what you expected. It was a bit fruitier than expected. A little effervescent. Yeah, there's kind of a freshness to this. I think this is a youthful wine because of that. A little residual sugar coming through on Sean's side. So this is an off-dry. Touch about its acidity, right? So this acidity is pretty high, right? Some people have noted that they're salivating. I'm still salivating. There's a ton of acidity, and if you go back to the nose plug, this acidity running all sides of your tongues, or of your tongue, excuse me, causing you to kind of salivate, and then the lingering profile of the wine from the taste side of things is a little bit sweet. So yeah, Swanbergs are on for dry, off dry. We're good there. Chuck, you're eating the Neiman Ranch bratwurst, and the wine is delicious with spicy mustard. You nailed the pairing. Perfect, and you did it blind. That's amazing. Well done. I'm glad you're here. Thank you. And hi, Diane. Okay, so we've got, from the nose, we had some tropical fruit, some lime zest, some lychee and some pineapple, some lime zest, some pear. We had a little bit of petrol. Are we finding all of that on the palate as well? Some of the tropical fruit, the lime, all of that kind of quality? Yes, getting off dry with a little bit of lemon zest coming in now. So a zesty quality to the citrus. There's a little bit of lime. Is the Jolly Rancher quality still there? sort of the confectionery sugar. So what's the quality of the fruit? Is the fruit on a tart side, on a ripe side, on a cooked side, on a sugared side, on a medicinal side? And where does that take you? It's pretty sugary. Part of that's the actual residual sugar playing with the fruit to give you that experience, but it's a tropical expression. So this takes you kind of down that road of a high acid, pretty off dry wine with tannin. Not really. No tannin necessarily. How about the alcohol? Is it low? Is it something more like a beer? Is it medium in the 12, 13, 14 range? Is it higher than 14? Do you feel a little burn in the back of the throat? There's a spicy finish. There's no astringency coming from Jeff and Sean saying the spicy finish is there. There's a little bit of a spiced element, which is kind of inner. Taylor's pointing out that there's a lower alcohol. Rick, where does it take you west? West where? Low 12% alcohol, medium to low alcohol. Yeah, that's for alcohol wine. I think a discussion we've had a couple times now where the little ball of acid that is a ball of acid with much sugar, and that sugar potential alcohol, right? Fermentation takes the sugar and the yeast eats that sugar and kicks out carbon dioxide and alcohol. And if you have a little bit of residual sugar left, you have the potential then to have lower alcohol because you've left sugar in the mix. And that's seemingly the case. Felt sunburn in the nose, Max is noting, but not so much in the throat. Yeah, I agree. I think this is probably a moderate to low alcohol. So what varietals do you start thinking about in that respect? Start to ponder that. And as we think about those varietals, is there a quality experience here? Is this a long experience of a finish? Is it 10 seconds or less? Is it between 10 seconds and 30 seconds? Or is it 30 seconds and more? And in that calculation, take out that sweetness and that acidity. Think about the flavors. How long are those flavors in your mouth? Because the residual sugar is longer, but is it the flavor that's there? We're getting a couple for the Riesling. How are you, sir? Welcome. So glad to have you here. Recently on the table. High potential residual sugar. Riesling should be one of the varietals you talk about. Let's talk about a few other varietals that you could potentially have with high acid and Riesling. Any ideas? Pinot Gris was just tossed out there. You could have some residual sugar, especially from Alsace. Probably not this much, but you could. And so you could have some residual sugar coming from Pinot Gris. Some of the acidity, I think, will feel a bit different, but let's keep that on the table. This is what we're looking for. The varietals should you consider. The exercise in doing a blind tasting is always to try to put out a couple of things that you have to work out. Kristen Sanders is saying, the Wachau, are you thinking like Gruner Veltliner from the Wachau? Middle Road Riesling coming from Taylor. Petit Manseng, thank you, Crystal. That's what we're looking for. Another varietal that has high acid and some tropical flavor and potential. Absolutely have to put in Petit Manseng. Peter's doing that too. Rick, yeah, it should be something we talk about for sure. What about Chenin Blanc? We'll throw Chenin Blanc in there. High acid and potential residual sugar and something like Wavra. So we've got Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, Gewürztraminer, all grapes that you'd find in Alsace. We've got the Chenin Blanc thrown in there from France, from Loire Valley, and other course. And then we throw in also Petit Manseng, which could come from southwestern France and Virginia and other places potentially. So we got to work our way through those particular varietals to figure out where we're talking about. We had a couple of people go right directly to Riesling, and that's terribly appropriate with descriptors like lychee and petrol, which you don't necessarily find on other varietals. We had a descriptor earlier on about kind of grandmother's, and that perfumed element is, I think, an appropriate thing to talk about with respect to, say, Gewürztraminer. And you could have some of that spice that some people picked up on the back end of the aroma and some of the back end finish with this title from the way of Gewürztraminer and some residual sugar potentially. But as you get into it again, like the tropical fruit, that high acid, the low alcohol. And so when you say the low alcohol or low or moderate alcohol, you almost automatically kick out Petit Manseng. The alcohol would be a lot higher on the Petit Manseng. And you kick out probably the Chenin Blanc, which is going to be a touch higher alcohol too. This has just to it that is not those particular varietals. I don't quite get the rose character and the spice that you might get in Gewürztraminer. Pinot Blanc has a lemon element to me and a pear quality for sure, so it's in the running, but the residual on this is a little bit higher than I would find typically from Pinot Blanc. And Brie, I think you might get a little bit more color and a little bit more weight, and I'm not sure that that's here. So I think I'm pretty comfortable with Riesling. Yeah, Peter, you're pointing out that Northern Italy could be an option. We could be playing with, if we're playing with Riesling, we would probably not find as much of Riesling there, but you could go over to the Alto Adige for sure, and find an occasional variation, but they tend to be a touch drier. For sure, we could be looking at Germany. Steven's calling us this particular wine at one of our previous wine sales. So let's talk about where you'd find Riesling in the world, and then we'll start to dial in on particular spots where this could happen, right? So Germany, absolutely, and a number of places in Germany, there's a different expression from, say, the Nahe region to the Rheingau region to the Mosel region. Alsace, which we touched on, Northern Italy could have that example. We could talk about it from the Finger Lakes of New York. There's some, of course, produced a little bit in Virginia. You have expression from Oregon and from Washington and from California. We have Austrian Riesling. We have Australian Riesling for sure as well. So in the process of doing a deductive tasting, you're trying to then weed out certain things. What can we say to feel like we're comfortable saying it's not? So I'm pretty comfortable saying it's not, for example, Australian. Australian Riesling from the Clare Valley or the Eden Valley, for example, would be tons of acidity like we get here, residual sugar, really dry, acidic and dry. And so I think we could push out Australia, for example. Austrian, yeah. Austrian has a potential here, but generally speaking from the Wachau, as was noted earlier, you're going to get a bit more dryness too. Sometimes you get density, and they take that density and weight and ferment it more fully, and therefore you get less sugar, a little less of the tropical notes too. I get usually more of that petrol quality and a mineral profile, less the tropical element. Yeah, and Sean's saying that not Alsace. So let's go, right? Not enough weight on it, yeah. And so coming from more of the alcohol as a result of a greater amount of fermentation, and I'm just not quite getting that. Yeah, Jan, we're touching on Petit Manseng. I think Petit Manseng has the acidity and the potential pineapple for sure, so it has to be considered, but not quite the same amount of alcohol in this wine, so I would rule out Petit Manseng probably. So I think we're in Riesling, and I think we're looking not at Austria. We're not looking at places where you would find typically a dry Riesling. So we're taking out Austria, we're taking out Australia, maybe Northern Italy too in that discussion, and looking then more at Germany and potentially the New York Finger Lakes region. You could get certainly a sweet Riesling from Washington, for example. You have Dr. Lozen, for example, making beautiful, gorgeous German Rieslings, but also making wonderful wines with Chateau Saint Michel in Washington that are with the Riesling grape there and having an off-dry style. So Sean's going now all in on German Riesling. Doubling down German. And Jeff's got Speck with this. You guys are nailing perfect pairings with blind. You don't even know the wine and you're pulling stuff out. Or you have a deep pantry that's just ready to go at any moment's notice to pull out whatever you need. All right, let's talk about German. In this case, say the Nahe region versus the Mosel region. Nahe, I think, typically is a little bit more inland and up from where Mount Mosel is, which is in the more southwestern part of Germany. The Mosel is a collection of three rivers, the Mosel, Saar, and the Ruhr, which kind of come together and carved out these scars in the earth that reveal this beautiful blue slate kind of covering to these hillsides that are just shingled on the hill, treacherous to walk on, super sloped, and as a result, I think you get this kind of wonderful dichotomy of a cool climate space because it's northern, relatively speaking, and you get not as much warmth or as sun the longer growing season, but you get the sun beating down on these black slate kind of shingles that then refract back to the grapes and give you this great tropical profile, which you get in this wine. And it's amazing to think that you could be in a cool spot like on a riverbed in Germany and get just extraordinary tropical expression with a bunch of acidity. And so, yeah, this wine takes you, I think, pretty comfortably to a place like that. Carrie just threw out the faults, and I think that's an absolute opportunity too. I just don't get as much tropical kind of expression through the faults in the Nahe. I'm not as terribly well versed in the nuances between the regions in Germany, but it's a general gut sense that takes me from one place to another, and the Mosel just seems to be a potential opportunity here. And let's talk a little bit for a second on the off-dry character and the sweetness. Somebody threw out earlier a Spätlese. So in Germany, there's a quality designation that goes for wines that is a series of, essentially, if you think about it, passes in the vineyard with ripeness. And so there's a Cabernet level and a Spätlese level and an Auslese level and then a Baron Auslese level and a Trocken Baron Auslese. And what's important to understand about those levels is that if you put yourself in the mind frame of a wine grower, a grape grower in Germany, in a northern spot that's relatively cool, what do you prize? You prize ripeness. You prize a grape coming to bear enough sugar to ferment to make an interesting wine. And the first pass or so, the first grapes that come to ripeness, you might pick, and that becomes sort of a cabinet level that give you some residual sugar potential and then therefore a lower alcohol. So if your total alcohol potential is 11.5 or 12% and you left a little residual sugar, you might end up with an 8%, a 9% wine. If you had a later into the season pick that is, say, 12 or 13% potential alcohol, 12.5, 13% potential alcohol, and you still left residual sugar to an 8 or 9% level of alcohol, or even 10%, but you still had enough residual sugar to leave in there to give you that sweetness, and you have a little bit more body, a little bit more weight, it might be a Spätlese. And it differs from year to year. The terms stay the same. So the Cabernet and the Spätlese and the Auslese are the same each year, but the designations happen differently each year because of that given year. So a Cabernet from one year could theoretically be sweeter than and more rich than a Spätlese from another year, tightness, depending on what happened. To put it in context for those of us in Virginia, 2011 is a very different year than 2010. 2018 is a very different year than 2019. So that allows a kind of different perspective. So when we're talking about these types of wine, and if you're saying German, you're saying Riesling, and you're saying, say, Mosel, would you say Cabernet, Spätlese, Auslese? And you get to that by thinking a little bit about the textural quality of the wine. And so the textural quality of this, is it light? Is it medium? Is it more robust? And by that, is it skim milk? Is it 2%? Is it whole milk? Yes. Max is saying, okay, Max, great. A German Halbtrocken. So Halbtrocken meaning half dry Riesling from the Mosel, but thinking more perhaps of Rheingau or Rheinhessen. Here in the US, maybe Moselle, but a Spätlese or maybe a Cabernet. Yeah, I think a Spätlese or a Cabernet. Crystal's throwing Cabernet out there. And I'm in between kind of Cabernet and I think there's a density to the middle palate here, the central part of the experience that has a little bit of weight, a little bit weightier than skim milk, for example. And so I'm kind of putting myself in the more Spätlese world. As it warms, it gets heavier. That's right. As the wine, Jan points out, gets a touch warmer, the sugar quality kind of gets a little bit more laden and less muted, and the aromatics kind of bloom a little bit more too. And yes, it gets a little bit more viscous. So I think it gets a little bit weightier. Okay, so we're Riesling grape probably Germany. So old world Germany. I'm gonna venture to run this as a Mosel production, and I'm gonna say Spätlese from 2000, and it's a new wine. It's a fresher wine. We had noted earlier, kind of a little spritz. 2017. What do you guys think? Do you differ? I mean, Max, do you stick with kind of Rheinhessen? Sean, are you still on Auslese? Auslese would be a bit richer, I think, than this, and sweeter, generally speaking. Have a bit more of a weight to it. There's a challenge in all this now, though, as a lot of producers are embracing more the Halbtrocken style, are embracing a drier style in general. We talked a bit about that with respect to kind of dry and sweet white wines. Sweet wines don't necessarily get the drift they should, because the world thinks dry is serious and contemplative, and sweet wines are for people who don't necessarily know anything about wine, and that's not the truth. In the 1900s, to put it in context, these wines, if this is indeed a German, sold for more than Bordeaux and were well prized because ripeness was something you didn't exactly have a 24/7 grocery store at your beck and call that could send you or get you tropical fruit. And so experiencing fruit like place like Germany, for example, would be something very special and novel. So Max is coming back with Mosel. We're here in Spätlese, and a couple of people voting for 17 and 18, 18 and 17. Yeah, I agree. I think we're in the sort of we're in a 2 to 4 year range, a youthful expression of Riesling. So I'm going to stay with 17 Spätlese from the Mosel. And everybody else, you can start to ready your bottles. Ready? Let's take one final sip just for fun. I did not spit any of that. All right. And we have, ooh, yeah, I can see from the capsule. For those of you that used the tinfoil and threw the capsule away, that was helpful. This is, I was a touch wrong, which is good. Selbach Oster, they've been producing for 400 plus years, multi-generations of family making this particular wine, or wines, I should say, and they have a series of holdings in the Mosel. And that's right up here in the top corner of the label. And you'll find it's coming from Zeltinger Sonnenur. So the Sonnenur vineyard in the village of Zelting. So Sonnenur from Zelting, which is where the Zeltinger means that. And then it's cabinet level, 2018. So a bit warmer and richer than I expected. And so that's really cool. We get a cabinet production from this producer. You can find whatever you want from Selbach Oster and just buy it. They're all flipping amazing. They're delicious wines. We had occasion to taste with the present generation who's making wine, and she is a dynamo. At once, she maintains the heritage of 400 plus years of family production, and yet is looking at making new inroads to making wines that reach new people. She's making some fun wine out of old vineyards. She's making new wines out of new vineyards, and just a really great product. The wines are compelling, so it's easy not to overlook them. Because they are so benchmark, it's easy to think about trying to find someone new. And when you can find somebody doing something special in an old region, it's awesome. And so I hope you enjoy this wine. I hope you consider this wine as well as just a flat out tasty wine that you can just knock back. If I was to look into my crystal ball, I would predict that this wine will be gone in moments at all of your tables. It will be gone in moments at mine for sure. So thank you as always for joining us. We'll be back next week, I think. So we're kind of looking like we're going to alternate white, red, but who knows? At table. So to all of you, my friends, cheers. Look forward to you again. All the best.